Hello guys, I am here with another book review. If you have not seen my book review type videos, the way this will work is here in the beginning I will give you a brief 1 out of 5 star rating for each of the books, and then I will go through each book individually in detail with spoilers. So if you just want a quick did I like it, then just watch the beginning, and if you don't care about spoilers, or if this is a book you've already read and you want to hear my thoughts and feelings, then continue on to the full review. I will let you guys know that I have my stack here, but I did also read 5 books that I don't have because I borrowed them from Andrea, one of my pals. So we'll go to from the first to the last book that I read. The first book that I read for this chunk of books is The Rise of Kyoshi by F.C. Yee with Avatar co-creator Michael Dante DiMartino. This book I gave a 4 out of 5. Then next I read All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. Then I read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. This also got a 5 out of 5. Then I read Dead Woman Crossing by Geneva Rose. This I gave a 4 out of 5. Then I read all 4 of the Heartstopper graphic novels by Alice Osman. And then I read The Librarian of Auschwitz, the graphic novel by Selva Rubio, which I also borrowed from Andrea, and I gave a 3 out of 5. Then I read Last Day Alive by Geneva Rose. This I gave a 5 out of 5. And then finally I read Becoming Molly May, Finding Happiness in Online and Offline by Miss Molly May. Now let us get into the reviews. The first one I'm going to go into is Rise of Kyoshi. So if you are in any way, shape, or form an Avatar The Last Airbender fan, and I'm just going to grab you guys and show you, I'm a dedicated fan to the things of Avatar The Last Airbender, and I also, I don't know if you're able to see this, have a tattoo of Zuko on my leg. But this book is basically about the discovery of Avatar Kyoshi. And in it you find out that they thought that this other boy was the Avatar, and then through a bunch of different trials and stuff, every time they'd get into battle, because having watched Avatar, you know Kyoshi is the Avatar, this isn't a question to you. So every time they're doing a battle and she's not able, she's an earthbender and she can't bend small pieces of earth. Most earthbenders begin bending pebbles, but she can only do boulders. So every time there's a battle, you're waiting for her to break out and do something crazy. And eventually she does, and they realize that she is the Avatar. And then I forget the name of the character, their names are all quite similar, who is helping the young boy that I think is the Avatar. Basically is kind of evil, ends up killing the Avatar, trying to attack Kyoshi. And it's this whole thing. Then she goes on the run and she ends up finding the bandits that her parents were a part of, and you learn that Kyoshi's actually half earthbender, half airbender, which is why she uses her fans and has a harder time bending earth, which I found very interesting. And then her friend, I forget her name as well, is a firebender, and her friend's mom was teaching the wannabe Avatar how to be firebending, and there's a little bit of a gay romance between them, and it's very cute and overall very fascinating. This was a bigger book for me, over 400 pages, right? 430 pages, but I enjoyed every moment of it, and I'm currently starting the second book in the series. Next, I read All of the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. This was a Book of the Month pick, which I do always have my Book of the Month code linked down below. But basically it's about this girl named Isabel, and her toddler son was taken out of his crib in the middle of the night while her and her husband were asleep in the next room. And she has spent the last year basically trying to figure out what happened to him. And essentially her and her husband are no longer together. He's with another woman, and that's really hard on her. She's just having a lot of hard times, basically. And eventually you come to find out that she was like sleepwalking. She's like really bad at sleep. She hasn't like slept in like super long time. And this is what the podcaster, yeah, a true crime she's going to like this like true crime convention, and she's speaking with like this group or whatever. Then on her flight home, she ends up sitting next to a true crime podcaster, and he's like, oh, you want to come on and tell your side of the story? And she's like, no, like I don't. Then eventually like they bump into each other again, and she agrees, and he comes and stays with her. And through all of it, you're realizing that her husband, her, I guess, ex-husband's kind of shady. I guess she used to work for him, and then they started dating, and she had to quit her job, and it was this whole thing. And he was like married when they started seeing each other, and then his wife like suspiciously died, and then they got together. And then now he's with this other girl who, like, Isabel looks exactly like his ex-wife, and this new girl looks exactly like Isabel. And Isabel, I guess, like, had been sleepwalking since she was a little girl, and you think you're coming to like understand that maybe she did something to the baby while she was sleepwalking, because you think that she like killed her little sister while she was sleepwalking. Then eventually you find out that her mom actually drowned her little sister during a fit of postpartum like psychosis after she lost a baby. And it's this whole thing, and it's just fascinating. And then eventually you find out that the podcaster is actually brothers with the ex-husband's first wife, and is basically trying to like prove that he's the reason that the little baby went missing. And you eventually find out that he in fact is, and that the new girlfriend stole the baby out of the crib and gave him away to a more fit mother, and end up finding him, and it is a happy ending. So this was very, very good. I highly recommend. After that, I went change of pace, and I read Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. I love them. Christina and Lauren, they make fantastic books. This is about a girl named Hazel, and she's wackadoodle. This book had me laughing out loud because Hazel is just nuts. And she had a crush on this guy, Josh Lamb, in college and whatever, and then Hazel ends up being a teacher, and then she's like hanging out, she's getting a new job at like a different school with like one of her best friends, and she's at a party, and Josh Lamb ends up being there, and she's like, oh my god, what are you doing here? And he's like, this is my sister's house. And so she didn't really think much about it when her best friend's brother's name was Josh, because it's a common name, and her best friend's married, so different last name. And they become friends, and they're like, something happens at Hazel's house, and she ends up having to stay at Josh's house. And they end up falling in love, and it's just so cute and funny. It's just a beautiful, wonderful rom-com, as all of Christina Lauren's books are. For the 4 Heartstopper books, I'm gonna just kind of group them into one. Here's a picture of them. They're super cute. It's like a gay high school romance graphic novel. I've rated all of them either a 4 or a 5. Really enjoyed them. Super quick to read. I read the first 3 of them in one night. And yeah, they were just incredible. It's about like, I forget even the names of the characters. One of them's Nick. Charlie. Charlie is out and gay, and he got outed, which is a horrible, terrible thing to happen to anybody. Like, I can't even fathom that. And he ends up like joining the rugby team, and him and this kid Charlie start getting closer and closer, but Charlie's straight. Everybody just keeps saying like, you're falling for him, but he's straight, don't fall for the straight boy, da 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 da. Turns out Charlie's actually bi, and he's not out to anybody, and they end up getting together, and it's just like cute. And then through it, like, different characters have bigger parts. There's like a trans friend, a lesbian friend, there's topics of like disordered eating. There's like a lot of things to go into this with like trigger warnings. I'm sure you could look up what they are, because I don't want anybody to get triggered by anything in it. But overall, they were absolutely phenomenal reads. Super quick, easy. If you're in a reading slump, I think they helped like get me like way back into reading, because they were just so good and quick. Loved them. Then I read The Librarian of Auschwitz, a graphic novel, which was like fine. I do tend to find books about the Holocaust quite interesting. And this was about a girl, I forget her name, Dita. And her family is taken, obviously, to Auschwitz because they're Jewish. And she ends up running like this undercover library. And it's basically about how like that helps get her through it. And then she gets out and lives happily ever after. So it was fine. I wouldn't like suggest it, but it wasn't bad. I accidentally skipped over this book, which is Dead Woman Crossing by Geneva Rose. It says J.R. Adler before she changed her pen name to like her real name. But this is book 1. These are a series, and I pray that there's a 3rd book because they are so good. This is book 1. My friend Madison got me these for Christmas, and it is about this girl named Kimberly King, and she is an ex-NYPD detective, and she's moving to like a small town called Dead Woman Crossing in Oklahoma because she wants to raise her daughter Jessica like out of the city and more hands-on. She's really never home when she was working as like NYPD. So she ends up moving in with her mom, and through this you learn that like her and her mom don't have the best relationship. She grew up with a very, very abusive father who's abusive towards her and her mother didn't really do anything to try to get them out of the situation, which is neither here or there, but she does harbor some like negative feelings towards her mom for keeping her in that situation. And her new stepfather picks her up from the airport, and like he's very like the stereotypical southern misogynistic patriarchal whatever asshole, and he's like basically giving her shit for like working and not having, and like her Jessica not having a dad in her life and this, that, and the other thing, and he just freaking sucks. Hate him, literally hate him from the get-go. I hated him. And they pull up to the house, and it's this big, beautiful, like, house on land. And she's like, oh my god, it's so beautiful. And then they keep driving past it. And there's basically, like, a shed in the backyard. He's like, well, we're here. She's like, oh, what do I do to get kicked out here? And he's like, this is where we live. My daughter and her husband and their 2 boys live in that big house. So they're, like, cramped into this tiny house, basically, like, as small as her New York City apartment. And her and the stepdad just keep butting heads. And then there's this girl, Hannah, that ends up being found dead, and it is an eerie similarity to how this other girl had died in the same town, which it got its name after, Dead Woman Crossing. And it seems like a copycat killer, and she's like going through the motions of trying to figure it out, teaming up with like the sheriff. And the sheriff, Sam, he is so sweet. He like, you'd think, again, it being like based in the South and him being a man, would have like some sort of like thing about Kimberly being like a girl. He doesn't. Some of the other people on the force do, including this one guy who's currently on like leave because he beat his wife. And so yeah, basically it's like in a small town, people don't talk to outsiders, and Kimberly's having a hard time gaining the trust even with her own family. And basically she ends up figuring out that Hannah had like she had a daughter, and you find out that her daughter's dad isn't who everybody thought it was. Like she gets a hold of him and is like, yeah, like she's missing, like your daughter. He's like, why aren't you in your daughter's life, basically? And he's like, she's not mine. And he's like, what do you mean? And she's like, when she fell pregnant, it was impossible for the baby to be mine because I was out of town for like months working when she would have gotten pregnant. And she's like, okay, who's this mystery man? They're trying to figure it out. And then they like find these mysterious phone calls like in the middle of the night to like burner phones on Hannah's phone. And eventually she's like tries calling the number, and she hears the phone ring in her house and finds out that the mysterious dad to Hannah's baby is her piece of shit stepfather. And Hannah was like wanting out of like Dead Woman Crossing and was threatening to out him if he didn't give her money, and so he basically murdered her. And it was just such a good book. 4 out of 5. I didn't give it a 5 because I pretty much guessed from like a third of the book in that he was the murderer. And the reason I was so quick to guess that was because he was like really, like they talked about him a lot in like the first beginning of the book, and then they just stopped talking about him, and I was like, they wouldn't have made him that like annoying and prominent of a character if like it didn't matter. So then after I read all the graphic novels, I picked up the second book, which was even better. This one, 5 out of 5. I sort of guessed it, but also didn't. So again, it's still continuing on with Kimberly King and this town, and basically Piper goes missing on her way to her friend Miley's house. Her grandparents like thought she went over there for a sleepover, and in the morning Miley calls them and it's like, oh, can Piper come play? And she's like, she's with you, and she's like, no, she's not. So it's very weird. So Kimberly knows that the first 24 hours are like the most important to finding her. And through the book, you start the book already like chapter 1 knowing that Piper is dead. So like every few because like these books are written third person, and then every few chapters there'll be a chapter in first person and you're like in the mind of the killer. And that's how it starts. Like the first chapter begins with, I didn't realize what I had done until I saw the blood on my hands. And then like you know from that moment that like you're in the mind of like the person who did it. And so eventually like within like the first 48 hours you get another flashback like or to the mind of the killer chapter where they're like, I knew I had to like get rid of your body, they're out there looking for you, I was out there looking for you with them. And you're like, oh my god, who is it? And then like the next morning they find her and like there's no sign of like SA. She is like wrapped nicely in a blanket, her eyes are closed, like she was put there like, as they say in the true crime sphere, with care. And so they're like, whoever did this like maybe didn't mean to. And then next thing you know, her friend Miley goes missing too, and it's this whole back and forth, and they're like getting a hold of Miley's dad, and they're like, why, because he's also not in Miley's life. And come to find out, Miley's parents had like another child. Miley had an older sister who died of cancer, and after that the mom kind of like just couldn't cope, and so he left because she was crazy. And come to find out, Miley's mom, she's the one who did the damn thing. And it was horrifying, but Miley was thankfully found alive. And that was great. And then the final book I read was Becoming Molly May. And this book has terrible, terrible, terrible reviews. And I gave it a 4 out of 5. Every autobiography I read gets at minimum 4 out of 5, because in my opinion, if anybody is willing to write down on paper the story of their life in any capacity, that's doing a lot. So was this book fantastic? No. Would I recommend it if you're not obsessed with Molly? No, but I'm obsessed with Molly, so I enjoyed reading it. And people are like, well, this book was like trash, she has no life experiences. You go into reading this book knowing that it's an autobiography written by, at the time, a 22-year-old. Like, she even mentions how old she is in the beginning. Like, I don't understand why people went into this thinking it's gonna be like this work of art. I just don't get what people were expecting. It was what I expected. It was fine. And yeah, that is everything I have read for this chunk of time. I don't know, from approximately May, about a month I read all these books. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not, then well, give it a thumbs down. Either way, you're helping out my channel. Comment down below, subscribe if you've not already, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.